Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited to have you here because today we're basically unlocking the minds of intensely curious, highly gifted children. Whether you're a teacher, a parent, or honestly just someone fascinated by human brain wiring, you are in for a real treat. We're going to take a magnifying glass to something that gets completely misunderstood, misdiagnosed all the time, and is just absolutely critical if we want to help these kids thrive. We're talking about the literal engine of giftedness, intellectual overexcitability. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the engine of giftedness. Then we'll cover strengths and struggles, intellectual OE versus ADHD, essential classroom strategies, supporting the whole child, and finally, we'll wrap up with outcomes and some really great free resources. So I want to kick things off with a question that might hit a little close to home. Why do the brightest students sometimes seem like the absolute most distracted? Think about it for a second. You've probably felt that deep, hair-pulling frustration of managing a student, or maybe raising your own child, who either interrupts you with a barrage of 50 completely random questions before you've even had your morning coffee, or they just completely zone out during a lesson they should realistically grasp in 2 seconds. It's a total contradiction, right? I mean, how can a kid be so profoundly smart, yet so totally disconnected from what's right in front of them? Section 1. The engine of giftedness. To figure out that contradiction we were just talking about, we really have to shift our lens. We need to stop looking at the symptoms and start looking at the root causes. We're going to borrow a brilliant framework from psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski. He actually identified 5 different areas of what he called overexcitability. But the one that's most heavily linked to giftedness is intellectual overexcitability, or OE for short. So what is it? It's an intensified, almost insatiable drive for knowledge, understanding, truth-seeking, analysis, and problem-solving. And I really want to put a spotlight on that word insatiable, because this isn't just a quirky personality trait, and it's definitely not a student just trying to show off. This is literally neurological wiring. Gifted kids with strong intellectual OE feel this intense, powerful need to pull ideas apart and make sense of the world. It's how they're built. So, what does this actually look like on a random Tuesday? The signs are actually pretty fascinating. You're going to see a relentless, never-ending stream of why, how, and what-if questions, and this starts young, really young. And they don't just like a topic, they do these massive, obsessive deep dives into heavy stuff like ethics, philosophy, or, quantum physics. Their brains are moving at such a high speed that they literally experience racing thoughts, which can totally mess with their sleep. You'll also notice they get preoccupied with massive existential questions like the meaning of justice or the fate of humanity way earlier than any of their peers. Oh, and they have an intense need for precision and logic, which means, yes, they will absolutely correct your mistakes and argue their points until they're blue in the face. But here's the thing. When this intensity is actually supported, it's the exact fuel that leads to incredible, world-changing innovation. Section 2. Strengths and struggles. But an engine that runs this hot needs the right kind of environment. Otherwise, things are going to go off the rails pretty quickly. When you put this massive cognitive drive into a traditional, slow-paced classroom, you start seeing the dark side of understimulation. For these kids, boredom isn't just annoying, it is physically painful. And that leads directly to them just flat-out refusing to do work they think is pointless or repetitive. That deep analytical superpower? Well, without a challenge, it mutates into crippling perfectionism and analysis paralysis. Socially, it can be tough too, because other kids just see them as these intense know-it-alls, which is why they often gravitate toward adults. And that existential awareness we mentioned, without guidance, it can cause severe anxiety at a super young age. Honestly, if you're dealing with disruptive behavior or a kid who's totally checked out, lack of stimulation is almost always the culprit here. Section 3. Intellectual OE versus ADHD. Now, because these struggles look so much like behavioral issues, it brings us to a massive paradigm shift and a huge risk for highly gifted kids: misdiagnosis. We absolutely have to know how to distinguish between intellectual OE and ADHD. See, with intellectual OE, the inattention is completely situational. It pops up when a task is boring or shallow. But the second you hand that same kid a highly complex, difficult task, boom, their focus is suddenly laser sharp. ADHD, on the other hand, involves pervasive executive function difficulties. We're talking working memory, organization, impulse control, and those struggles persist even when the kid is doing something they love. Now, a really important caveat here. Giftedness can totally mask ADHD. And yes, a child can have both. That's what we call twice exceptional, or 2E. That's why professional evaluation is a must. But as the adults in the room, we have to stop jumping to the conclusion that a bored, squirmy gifted kid automatically has an attention deficit. Frankly, they might just have an attention surplus for things that actually make them think. Section 4. Essential Classroom Strategies. Let's move to how this builds into real, everyday solutions. How do we actually challenge them? Well, they don't just need to do the same work faster. Acceleration on its own just isn't going to cut it. They need depth. They need complexity. And that brings us to this highly effective 3-step process called curriculum compacting. It's a game changer. Step 1. You pre-assess their mastery of the content before you even start teaching the unit. If they already know the material, you move straight to Step 2. Let them skip the repetitive practice worksheets. Just skip them. Then, Step 3. You take that safe time and replace it with genuine enrichment. Let them do independent research or dive into a complex analysis of the topic. The takeaway here? Stop giving them more of the same easy work. Give them entirely different challenging work. What's really interesting about this is how easily we can tweak the assignments we're already using to prevent that toxic boredom just by leaning into Bloom's higher-level thinking. Think about a standard task, like having a student just answer basic factual history questions. Okay, fine, but to make this OE-friendly, you bump it up. Have them research primary sources and present completely alternative interpretations, or argue a wild what-if scenario. Or rather than just summarizing a basic science concept from a textbook, challenge them to design a brand new experiment that tests the ethical implications of that science. This is exactly how you feed that intellectual engine.
Now, I can already hear some of you saying, okay, but I have 40 kids in my classroom. There's absolutely no way I have time for this. But actually you do. Here's some incredibly practical adaptations that require basically zero resources and work wonderfully, even in the large, under-resourced classrooms we often see in South African contexts. Throw up a wonder wall on a bulletin board where they can stick all those 50 random questions they ask you so you can address them later. Utilize peer teaching pairs. Keep a simple stack of open-ended extension prompts on your desk that require no extra prep or materials. Or, my personal favorite, just carve out a daily 10 to 15-minute window for a deep dive. Let them independently tackle an advanced topic while you catch up with the rest of the class. It's that simple.
Section 5. Supporting the whole child. Of course, we can't only look at academics, right? These are complex little humans. Because their brains are constantly going 100 miles an hour, we have to teach them actual mind management. Teach them to park their racing ideas in a little notebook or a notes app so they can get back to the present moment without panicking that they'll lose a brilliant thought. Try using timed thinking breaks or quick brain dumps before a test to help manage that crippling perfectionism. And for the parents out there, you can provide amazing intellectual nourishment at home just by stocking the house with documentaries, really tough puzzles, and good books. But maybe the most crucial thing you can do at home, model healthy debate. Let them argue with you, as long as it's respectful. Showing them how to process that intense mental energy dramatically reduces their risk of burning out. Section 6. Outcomes and free resources. When we finally meet this intense intellectual OE with real depth, challenge, and genuine respect, I promise you, the transformation is nothing short of incredible. Keep this absolutely crucial takeaway in your mind. It is not defiance or arrogance. It is wiring. The next time you feel your patience hanging by a thread because a kid won't stop questioning your instructions or is refusing to do a basic worksheet, remember that phrase. Validating their intensity is magic. Just saying something like, "Wow, I love how deeply you think about this," builds immediate trust and can instantly diffuse a power struggle. You're showing them that you respect who they are at a fundamental neurological level. Ultimately, when we stop fighting them and start providing the right fuel and maintenance, we can completely redirect these kids. We can take them off a path of underachievement, severe anxiety, and constant behavioral concerns, and point them straight toward leadership, creativity, and unbelievable independent work. They stop fighting the system purely because the system has finally started feeding their hunger for knowledge. Now, if you are fired up and ready to start using these strategies and you want to dig deeper, you absolutely have to check out the amazing work being done by Gifted Children South Africa. They are the brilliant minds behind today's insights. Do yourself a favor and head over to their website to download a ton of incredible free resources. You can find all of it at giftedchildrensouthafrica.org. Also, I highly recommend checking out their dedicated Spotify podcast series for some really deep dive discussions on all of this. Plus, you can easily find all of their social media links right there on the website so you can stay connected and keep learning from them. So I want to leave you with one final thought as we wrap up today's explainer. Think about the children in your classroom or the kids sitting at your own kitchen table. And just ask yourself, how will you fuel the engine of a gifted child today? What is one small, simple shift you can make right now to turn their sheer intensity into their greatest superpower? Thanks so much for hanging out with me today to explore this. Keep asking those big questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.